Okay, it's like 4:20 and I assume I can start. Thanks for showing up, and I know this is like the late evening and it's security and it's like, you know, getting attention. And I hope that the next hour you're going to spend really good and we'll have some fun. So yeah, my name is Victoria. I live and work in Norway. I work for the Microsoft, but originally I'm coming from the Latvia. And I'm Latvian, but sometimes people they mix my accent, and I'm saying like, yeah, I have a proper accent to speak about the security. So in the free time, I'm just doing a lot of the motorcycling and the hiking and all of the extreme stuff, and maybe this is the reason why I'm in the security field too. So yeah, working for the Microsoft and helping people, customers, to land into the DevOps and particularly DevSecOps world and how to build the things in Azure securely, making the governance and all of that stuff. And speaking about that, how many of you are like working with the Azure? Cool. How many of you have DevOps or think that you have DevOps? That's nice, good. So I'm not going to spend the time explaining the Azure and the DevOps principles. The only thing what I should mention, even if you're not working in Azure, the principles, the security principles that I'm going to show today, you can apply easily to any cloud, even the Amazon and so on. And since it's like evening, I have prepared some riddle. Basically, do you know what those numbers means? Any ideas? No? Seriously, come on, warm up. Okay, so this is like the statistic. On the 100 developers, we do have 10 ops and 1 security person. And that's my life like for the last 15 years. Dealing with a lot of the developers and helping them to build secure applications, secure solutions. And at the time when the DevOps was introduced, at the beginning I was like, oh my God, it's going to be a nightmare for the security because like we're going to release all the things like 46 times per day. And I was like, okay, how I'm going to deal with that? But the principles behind the DevOps are like that we are implementing the things to the processes, through the tools and through the people. And this is where we can also implement the security. And I was thinking like, okay, and this is where I'm working a lot like with the people and helping the DevOps guys or the DevOps together with the DevOps ambassadors to implement the security. In all of these 3 areas, like in the processes, in the tools, and working with the people. But as for today, I'm limited for the 1 hour. I'm going to focus on the tools. And one of the things when it comes to the tools and the DevOps is automation. And I was like thinking like, okay, that's a cool. And why not to automate myself and just get rid of the security by replacing the scripts and some practices. So I could spend more time on other areas more interesting. And this is what we are going to talk today. How we can automate our security team. Because if you remember the numbers, 1 against the 100 people. The question is like, okay, how should and what should exactly we automate when it comes to the development? I like to take the words from the one security guy named Sting. Basically, and use the same approach like that we should implement the security controls on every step what we are doing. There are a lot of the steps and we are like limited in the resources. Sometimes we are limited in the people amount and in knowledge, and therefore I have selected some patterns which I'm going to explain today. At least you can start with those patterns, and this is something what I commonly see also speaking with the customers, that sometimes it's enough to implement 6-8 bullets in the Azure in the development to get 80% of the security in place. So the first thing when you start to do the security is definitely you should plan your infrastructure wisely. You don't need to run for all of the things what you see, like which has the title security, and just get it inside. And when we speak with the customers, for example, mostly you are already in Azure. Even mostly you are already doing the DevOps. And you already have the resources in Azure, so you need to do something with your Azure itself from the beginning. And yeah, that's the thing. So the thing what I suggest usually, the good practice is that if you are deploying the resources in Azure, start with the mindset that you need to have the subscription per environment, like we used to do this on the premises when we had like the dev, we had the prod environments, and the same you can do in Azure. So basically place the environments per subscription, because the subscription is a higher level of isolation when it comes to the identity, when it comes to the visibility and so on. There is another approach when you can even go further, and this is what I have done when I used to work with the Amazon cloud, is like that you can even isolate per applications. So if you have a huge applications, you can even put that application in the separate subscription and again separate per environments. The second thing is important is to apply the policies. So the Azure gives you Azure policies, and those allows you to prevent some security misconfigurations, compliance misconfigurations before even you try to do this. So the biggest example, like for example, we are in the European Union and we do have GDPR. Who knows GDPR? Everyone? Yeah, it's something with what we need to deal. And one of the statements is like, if you are dealing with the personal data should be in Europe. And through the policies, what you can do is apply the policy that no resource is allowed to be deployed outside of the Europe. So basically only in North or the West Europe data centers. Security center. This is the thing what requires the less effort. Basically, you're just enabling the security center, and magically you're becoming as a security wizard. It's like, I'm going to show some demos later, and that's a turbo boosting feeling, like, yeah, I know everything about the security. So basically that service allows you to see all the things what is happening inside of all of your subscriptions and across of the subscriptions. And also it can help you to prevent some threats. Infrastructure is a code, period. There's no anymore times when we were doing infrastructure just through the portal, like next, finish, I have the virtual machine. No, that doesn't work in the production. And the good reason behind that is not only the security, but it's also the disaster recovery. And if someone deletes by accident your infrastructure, how fast you will be able to redeploy it if you don't have it as a code. Like it could be ARM templates, it could be Terraform. So you choose a tool. And the good thing also, if you are using infrastructure or developing infrastructure as a code, you can implement some of the security controls, and I'm going to show later on my demo, which allows you again to prevent some misconfigurations. And the last but not least, production only for the CICD pipelines. This is what I'm telling all the time to the customers, and this is what I'm also like practicing for myself. Basically, you have divided your subscriptions, and now you have the production subscriptions. Remove all the access except like read only, and for the few folks who are the administrators. For others, it could be just read-only access. Only pipeline should have full access, and you should deploy all your resources for the pipeline. And there are different reasons behind that, like the compliance, the security, because you can easily track who have pushed the code, when it was, and the build. Again, you can check the build, that the build was successful, and your environment is not going to crash. And of course, it learns you or educates you fastly how to write the code or how to make the infrastructure as a code. And lately, CICD Pipeline actually is something where you are placing all your DevSecOps. And today on the demo, I'm going to show some of the things, what you can do without almost any cost, the financial costs except your time. So those principles you can apply in any cloud. It doesn't matter, is it like the Amazon, Google, or even on the premises if you are deploying. Except, yeah, security center is just for the Azure, but again, in Amazon, it's guard duty and all other things. So getting back to the principles, like I mentioned, when you do separate the subscriptions per environment, what you can do is to use management groups. So the management groups are the logical boxes where you're just placing the subscriptions per your pattern, like the production or QA or the department and so on. When you have placed your subscriptions, you have filtered them and placed like, okay, this is going to be the production management group, and this is going to be pre-prod or the QA. What you can do is apply the set of the policies, the rules, because sometimes for the QA and for the dev subscriptions, we want to have more relaxed policies, like we don't care that the resources are deployed somewhere outside of the Europe if we are not handling the data, if it's like the test data, or we're just not particularly following some of the SLAs, and still we want to give the full access to the developers and do the stuff, and basically it's like the sandbox. And if we speak about the policies, the cool thing is even if you have not implemented the policies, the policy engine is already in the place, in the front of all of your actions. Actually, it is in the front of APIs. So that means that every time when you are creating some Azure resource, it goes through the policy engine. You can take it as a firewall. If you have not created any policy, you're still crossing the policy engine. It's just by default not checking anything. So that means that if you are adding some policies, there is no way that someone is going to avoid them. The good practice is attach those policies to the management group, because if you are attaching these policies directly to the subscription, me as a subscription owner, I can remove them and just proceed with all habits. But if you are attaching them to the management groups, even the subscription owners can't remove those policies. Yeah, when we have formulated and we made the governance around all our Azure subscriptions, it's time to focus on our development, which is the most exciting part for me. And how do we do the development? And usually this is like the classical process that at the beginning we code, then we commit to the development branch and checking and going through the acceptance, and then we do delivery, and everything is good. We are merging to the master, and then we are pushing into the pipeline and making the release and going into the production, and then we do operate. And if you remember the guy named Sting, we can add every step, and on every step we can add the security tests, security controls, any security actions. So on the first step, when you are just developing the things, you already can implement the several things. One of them is educate the developers to use any extensions for the different EDAs. It depends what you're using. The Visual Studio, Visual Code, Eclipse, all of them has a different type of the extensions, which are mostly available for free, which allows you to check your code immediately while you're writing the functions and all of the things for the potential security issues. Then the good practice is together with the team, you are practicing the threat modeling. Basically, if I'm simplifying this, this is like the exercise when you sit down and like, okay, if I'm in the I'm the hacker, how I'm going to break my system? It's like, we have developed authentication system. Okay, one of the threats that me as a hacker, I'm going to try to make the brute force. So that means that you need to implement the function which protects you from the brute force, like locking the account after the 15 times of the try and so on. And so this is a really simplified threat modeling. Secure coding standards. It's like a hygiene. This is the same thing what you are doing when you are, let's say, so that most probably you do have some coding practices in the team. So you're just adding some secure coding practices, like, hey, let's not use the connection strings, passwords in the code. That's not a good practice, I assume. So such things, they should be written in the secure coding standards. And the old good thing, peer review. It always helps when the senior or dev lead looks on the code written by someone else, or like you're just looking at your peers' code, because we are good at seeing mistakes or misconfigurations or anything on someone else's work, but we are really bad at seeing this on our own work. And that practice is actually not, I know this is a time consuming, but that practice is really, it is in the place for the big companies, including Microsoft and Netflix. All of them do the peer review. So, and it's a good also from the educational perspective. Okay, we have done the code. We are committing that, and already on the commit stage, you can do the several things. You can implement the static code analysis, and I'm going to show one of the examples, which basically is going to check your code for the security misconfigurations. You also can train QA or the dev team to write security unit tests, so focusing on the security stories too. And what is most important, what I always suggest, is to have, or if you want to choose only one, or you can choose only one practice, take dependency management. Today's development is development with the different and dozen amount of the different libraries, what you're just adding on the top of your code. How many of you are maintaining these libraries and the packages? How many of you are checking for the updates? One. Yeah, it's a bit more than I usually see, I should admit. Yeah, and the thing is that these dependencies, we used to have security vulnerabilities, and I'm not going to explain. Some examples recently have been published for the NPM and for the others, so you need to follow. Okay, when we are on the acceptance, or when we are making release to the acceptance to the dev environment, you already can implement the things like checking your infrastructure as a code for the potential security non-compliance. Let's take the example, the virtual machine. Someone just wrote RM template with the virtual machine to be deployed with public IP, no network security group, and with the RDP open. How much time it takes before someone starts to brute force your virtual machine from the moment when it's spinned up? Exactly. It's like the seconds. And this is what you can check in your templates when they're deployed in the pipeline. And you can also, at that step, you can add the other security acceptance testing, and you can implement the security scanning. Even you can implement some pen testing, usually which is done on the production. But I'm going to show today the example on build pipeline. Okay, and we got lucky to survive till the production. And even on the production, if you missed some of the things, you can cover them on the production. Again, you need to check the configuration, because we are still human. And maybe we have some more rights left for the people to make changes directly in the production. So we still need to follow the configuration, but this is like the same configuration what you have deployed. You can make the pen test, because penetration tests are time-consuming. The real penetration tests are time-consuming. It can take from the 2 weeks and more. And if you are delivering really important project, then maybe it's worth to make one pen test, at least when you are just going with the big release, with the big changes. And on operations, monitoring. This is like always. It's not only about the security. If you don't know what is happening with your solution, then there is no point to, like, to speak about these previous steps. Threat intelligence. This is going on more advanced level, and if you are using the security center, then it is covered for you already. So basically, behind the threat intelligence, there is the analysis and artificial intelligence. When the Microsoft, what it does in Azure, it collects all the statistics, all the data, not only from you, but from all the Azure customers, and sees the potential, attacks. And this is like how we can identify the new flow of the new type of the attacks, and give that information for you too. So that, in the few words, what is behind the threat intelligence. And again, there's always space for the pen test. And what I also love to say that the Netflix, for example, is practicing house monkey. So this is basically the things which come, the services or the tools which are coming inside of your production and making the mess by switching out and seeing how you can cope with that. This is something what you can think about that. I don't suggest it to do with like immediately on the production. I believe management is going to be angry. And the last but not least, blameless postmortems. If you think that if you have done all of these things, you're not vulnerable against the data leakage and attack, no, there's no warranty still. So you need to be prepared for the potential hacking, that you have been hacked. And the most important one, always what I say, that one fail is just another education. Don't do the blaming game, like this is because you developed this stuff and you haven't thought about that. No, just analyze that and actually train, make some procedures, train mindset, what like, okay, how should we react if we are hacked? What are our steps? And later, just try to learn from that stuff. But I really hope that it's not going to happen to you. Okay, let's look how it, I'm like giving the example how it looks in Azure, and then we are going to look in the demo. Basically, what I'm taking, in this case, I'm using Azure DevOps. It used to be known as VSTS. Are you familiar, how many of you are familiar with VSTS? Cool, and with DevOps? That's good to see the same amount of the hands. Because this is basically the same tool, but just rebranding stuff. So basically, the Azure DevOps, or VSTS, keeping in short, it's a collaboration tool for the developers, which has everything required for the development, from the planning till pushing the things towards the cloud. it doesn't matter which one, Azure or Amazon. In DevOps, with the Azure DevOps, you can build the pipelines and deliver the things to any cloud or even to the on-premises. So the daily routine is like following. The developer develops a code. It could be in the Visual Studio. It could be in code. When it pushes in his development branch, I'm just taking one of the Git flows examples, which triggers CICD pipeline and delivers the development or like the new functionality to the Azure Dev subscription, like we discussed it. Like the good practice is to have the development in the separate subscription. And if everything is fine, he just merges his branch like to the master, which again pushes the code to pushes CI/CD pipeline and goes to the QA stage. And if it's good, we are in the production. So what you can do is, or there are the few tools what you can immediately like take and implement it after my talk is like if you're using the Visual Studio or the code, some of the tools like DevScheme, which is open source provided by the Microsoft, not open source but free, sorry, provided by the Microsoft, which is looking for the also security stuff. PumaScan, totally open source solution, one of the fresh ones. And then the commercial security companies like Coverity, 45, they do provide extensions for the EDAs. And also what you can do is to write the pre-commit hooks. Basically, when you push the code, you can check that it is compliant with your kind of the coding standards and it does not contain sensitive information like the credentials. For example, GitHub is doing this nowadays automatically. It checks that you're not committing the secrets to the GitHub repository. On the CI/CD pipeline, what you can do is, again, to implement different type of the extensions or the services. If you're dealing with Azure, and the Azure DevOps, I suggest to look into the Azure Security DevOps Kit, which is totally for free, and it gives you good overall summary how the subscriptions, how the code and should be secured. Then again, Azure policies. The good thing, you can implement Azure policies already in the pipeline. So not to get the situation when you are delivering your infrastructure in the production and only on this step you get denied because you wrote the infrastructure which is not compatible with the policies. What you can do is to add the extension on the build stage to check that your infrastructure is compliant with the policies. So the developer is going to know yearly that he is not compliant with some Azure policies. The good tool, if you're in the GitHub, is Snug, and if you're in the DevOps, White Source Bolt extension, which is for free, which allows you to track the dependencies for the security issues. And then again, Coverity and the 45 and any other commercial stuff. Okay, we are on the production, and this is where you should focus on the things what I have explained before, like the policies, Azure management groups, I missed that word again, Azure Monitor, and the Security Center. Okay, theory is good one, but always we want to see the something practical. Yeah, that's like fail. Yes, that's good. Okay. Sorry. I do have, for the example, I do have the website deployed in the Azure, which is the website Parts Unlimited, basically the shop for the car stuff and some car services. The company names originally comes from the book Phoenix Project. Have you read the Phoenix Project? Okay, for others who are like now in the DevOps world, I strongly suggest this is like the novel about the IT. It's something what you're gonna enjoy. It's because a few years ago when it was released, I was reading, I was like, oh, it's like it was a déjà vu. But you see the things in the company, you see in the same book, so it's a good thing. That's a story about the Parts Unlimited, and this is like the example of a website, which is deployed in Azure, and basically it's written on the .NET Core, has some JavaScript things, and it is deployed in Azure. Let me show like the ASP. I think that was nope. Okay, that's not like this. Okay, so this is like my resource group. Let me zoom it. Even I was telling that we need to separate, like, you know, the stages. For the demo purpose, I just placed all the things in one resource group. So basically, I do have the development, I do have the QA, and I do have the production stages. And I do have them in the resource group. So the first thing, like I mentioned, when you're landing in Azure and you do have a lot of the subscriptions, the good thing is immediately to focus on the management groups. And the management groups, like I mentioned, there allows you to structurize, it's kind of like creepy, to structurize your subscriptions. In this case, it's per application, an application team, an infrastructure team. So you're just organizing all your subscriptions, and then you are applying the policies. And the good thing about the policies are that we do have a lot of the policies already. Let me see. Let's make it more amazing by adding more subscriptions, except this one and this one. So with the policies, you can reuse built-in policies, and there are plenty of them what you can take out of the box. There are different types of them, and if we are going to look into that, what you can see is how you are compliant. So basically, how many of your resources are compliant with the policies. And actually, you can even follow which of the resources are not compliant. Let me show, like, yeah, it's too zoomed out. Okay, let's see. So you can track down to each resource which is not compliant, and then later, like, you know, speak with the resource owner and, like, you know, you need to fix that. The thing is, sometimes if you have implemented policy with the status enforced, the person is not able to create non-compliant resource. But if that resource already existed, it's going to be visible here as non-compliant, because remember, the policy engine is like the firewall. So what is behind the firewall is already created and it's already non-compliant. Okay, we do have our policies in the place, and another good thing that the policies also are visible in the security center. So the security center is also taking the information from the policies. And speaking about the security center, like remember when I said that if you're enabling that, you start to feel like the security magician. And that's a thing, because after the security center is running for the view, you need to give it time while it's analyzing. But when it's done, you can see the things, the different things. Nobody likes compliance. And this is one of the things what we have implemented. So you also can see how you're doing good or bad with the compliance, with the different compliance, like ISO, like DSS, and so on. And also what you can see is security hygiene in the different areas, starting with the compute and apps. Basically, you can see the recommendations for your VMs, for the cloud services, for the containers, and all of that allows you not to think a lot what is happening under the hood. So basically what you can do is just rely on those recommendations and follow for the security status of your resources developed in Azure or deployed in Azure. It's like you don't need to have a security team to get some security things done. There are a lot of other things what you can basically explore in the security center, like the networking, network maps, and so on. I truly believe that the security center deserves its all own, like 1 hour session just to go through all of the things. So what you can do is just try it. Go enable 30 days trial, because the problem is that the free edition of the security center does not contain the threat intelligence, but again, it's like the thing that it's worth to try and play around and see how it works. Okay, when you have implemented the things like the management groups and the policies, and you have the security center, the next thing that, of course, you would like to focus on the pipelines, on the things what you are like on the development, and this is like my project. Basically, short tour in the DevOps. There are different tool sets. What you can see is like the boards, the repos, basically like the GitHub style, the pipelines, test plans, and artifacts. I'm going to focus on the repos and the pipelines today. We have a code. We do have the code all placed in repos, and like I mentioned, that the good practice is also to have the code for your infrastructure. In this particular example, I do have ARM templates. So basically, I'm like deploying all my infrastructure through the ARM templating. Okay. And I have built for the demo purposes, I do have the build pipeline, basically which builds my .NET Core solution, the website, and creates the artifact which I'm giving to the release pipeline, which is basically is having the steps like grabbing the artifact or build website and deploying this to the dev environment, to QA environment, and then later to the production. And like I said, that you can implement the security steps on the each of the stage. And if you start with the build, the first thing what you can do is to implement the white source. White source Bolt, what it does, it checks all your dependencies for the potential security vulnerabilities and gives you the real nice report. And additionally, it gives also the statistic about the licensing part. The second thing, what I have added in my build pipelines is security code analysis. Currently, it is in the preview, but you can just sign up, and it's fully for free. Basically, the idea behind that the Microsoft just shares the tools which are used internally in the pipelines for the community, and these tools are like the credential scanner, security risk detection, which allows you to see to make some fast testing. Bin scheme, it's like a lightweight scanner for the compiler and inline or linker settings. TS-lint if you're in the TypeScript, and some other things. So the way how you're doing is what I did. I just added those steps in my build pipeline. the first thing that I'm building, I want to check the code that it doesn't contain any credentials. So I just added the extension from this security code analysis. And then I'm publishing the security analysis logs because I want to get the results somewhere outside. What it does, it creates the separate CSV file with the security findings and in the logs, and you can download it and check it. And then I also have implemented the white source build because I want to know what is happening with my dependencies. So when you run the build, the first thing afterwards what you can see is you can check the logs, and for the time saving, I'm just going to show this. In my case, when I run the build pipeline, the CRED scanner just placed in the logs, but there is some finding. And if you want to see into details, just download the CSV file. And I found like, okay, it seems that some of our developers was like, have placed the credentials in the web.config, okay, and it actually points on the exact line where the credentials are located. And if you go to the web config to the line number 10, I think it does look like as a password. Great. So this is what you can catch during the build or the pull request. It depends where you are placing that step. And okay, we have done some checkings when it comes to the credentials, and we want to see the status of our libraries. So every time when my build runs, in the background I run also the task of the white source, which is checking all the dependencies. And we can see like some of the dependencies are either outdated or contains some security findings. And additionally, as you can see, it provides the statistic about the licensing, which is good because today you took some library which is fully open sourced, and tomorrow that library or the package is commercialized, and then you can, or has the license which forces you to open source all your code. And then as a company, you could be a bit like, in the position like that. Now I need to just to open source all my code. So it is worth to follow the licensing stuff too. Okay, so we have done some things on the build pipeline. And then the next thing what I would like to do is on going to the release, I would like to implement the penetration test. One of the things what you can do is to use OWASP Z-attack proxy. Basically, if you're not familiar with the OWASP, it's Open Web Application Security Project. It's a fully community-driven project, and it contains a lot of the really nice documentation related to the security. So basically, the descriptions of the attacks, examples in the different languages, and also they do have different open source tools, and one of them is the most popular is Z-attack proxy, which is what you can use for the pen testing. Basically, it's like, if you're keeping it simple, it's like the scanner which scans your code for the security vulnerabilities. And what they did, they have released the Docker image with the ZAP, which you can run against your application and check for the security. So basically, how it's going to look in the release pipeline. Okay, so I do have the release pipeline, and I have added the steps like I want to check when I'm deploying my solution. Like, let's look on my release pipeline, just to give an example. So my release pipeline contains like 3 environments, and I have decided to place the penetration test tasks like when the solution lands into the development environment. Basically, what I'm doing, I'm making the task which is running ZAP, my Docker, which is connecting to the Docker and running Zap task against the My Portal and making or the website and making the release notes or the release report about the findings. So we are publishing the report, and then just some practical steps of attaching the report. And as a result, when the release pipeline is done, what you can get the separate report, which is currently on my Docker, Zap Docker, where you can find some findings, which is like, okay, we can see the most problems what I have with the headers. Okay, this allows you during like release pipeline to find out all other security vulnerabilities or what you have missed. Additionally, what I did in another step, like, okay, it seems good, all seems good. I have tested my application. I have checked the developer, but he is not pushing all the credentials. I have checked my application, and what we have forgot about the infrastructure. So what you can do is there's like I mentioned, there's this AZS DevOps Toolkit. It has the separate extensions. AZS, if you will just look on Marketplace, you will find that extension, which contains two things. The RM template checker, which checks RM templates for the most common security violations, and also SVT, which is a security verification test focusing on your application environment. So basically it gives the report and the suggestions what type of the security things you should implement inside of for your environment. And again, this is kind of easy steps. Basically what you are just adding, you're adding the task, and you even can exclude some files if you are feeling that that's fine, like to have these RM templates. And the same is like you're just now, when it goes to the SPT test, you are just pointing to the resource group, to the subscription, and you run it. As a result, what you get in the logs, a zip file which contains all the details about the findings. And if you look on the example, this is like, yeah, it's the huge report, but the idea behind that, what it gives you is in the human readable format, it gives you the suggestions for the particular resources that like what is good to implement. Like in my case, I found that I'm not running on HTTPS. There are some not the latest version of the .NET framework is deployed, so this is not something good. And again, this is something what gives you the, like, you know, some security assurance. I'm not saying that all of these steps needs to be implemented immediately and as one all of them as one step, but at least some of them you can just take and start to play around. And think about that. It's like, yeah. Why it's like, sorry. It's like, you know, evening. Okay, not the presenter here. If you're going like this, I just give up. No, not. Yes, good. I did that. Okay, yeah. That was supposed to be a joke, but okay, it didn't work well. Thanks. I was speaking a lot about the different things, but what I would suggest is to focus on the 4 things. The first is like subscription per environment, apply policies, spend some time and play around with the policies. There's, of course, another talk like which type of the policies I should implement. Speak with the security team if you have it and ask what kind of the requirements they do have. If you don't have the security team, look on the compliance and the business requirements and just start there. Enable security center. Actually, that's going to give you a good understanding what type of the security controls you should implement. And then focus on the CI/CD pipeline. Yes? So basically, there are two types of usages. One is for free, but you still pay for the workspace, where the data is stored. But you always can choose the workspace, like log analytics workspace with the free tier. But what you pay for the traffic, and you pay some. It depends how much you have with the virtual machines. Mostly, like if you have PaaS, it's almost nothing. But if you have the virtual machines, then it's more costly. Yeah, if you have done all these 3 steps in the governance, I would suggest to focus on the CI/CD pipelines and implement the security things on each of the step. And as you saw, most of these tools, what I have showed today, like the security tools, the security extensions, they cost nothing, they're available for free, and you can just implement them. But okay, if it's not enough, there is, from the Science Institute, there is a really good poster, which basically gives the different tools, open source tools. So basically that poster summarizes all the tools for each of the step of deployment, and you can pick and choose these open source tools and see what are the best ones for you, depending on environment or the language which you are using. And just to summarize, these are the resources what I can suggest to start to look and explore. And I think I'm going to keep that slide if you want to take some screenshots. And later I'm going to publish those slides too. But nevertheless, I think I do have a time, yes, for the questions. And if there are no questions, thanks for your time and thanks for coming up. And sorry for the mess with the slides. It's like, you know, speaker's failure. Yeah.